Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody. This is Geoff with Fluent American checking in. I wanted to spend some time talking about hooks, introductions, and things like that. Just a little bit of time. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it. But if you do have some questions and things, be sure to take a look at our document. I just posted it in the comments, in the chat box. Also, be sure to check out our Facebook group, which is new, and it allows you to get basically some writing practice in. I post questions, sample essays, critiques, and things like that. So if you're trying to get some free writing practice in, I think the group will be really, really helpful for you. I'm going to post that link too. Just give me one moment. You'll see that in the chat box as well, and we'd love to have you. Now, today I want to talk about hooks because what I see with a lot of students writing, and in fact some other people who teach IELTS, is they teach these very standard hooks. What is a hook? A hook is the very first sentence of your essay. And not to name names on some other people who teach IELTS, but what they generally teach is that, oh, you should rephrase the question and then go into it in a very kind of generic, general format. That is not the way that I like to teach hooks. You know, the goal of a hook, that first sentence, is to do a couple things. One, it is to introduce the topic. But the second thing is that the job is to, you want to generate interest in your reader. So it does, the goal of a hook is to do two things. Write this in the chat box. The first thing, again, is to introduce the topic, but to do it in a way that generates interest in what the reader's about to get into. If you just do a rephrase of the question, if you just rewrite the question again, you're not going to get a hook that's very engaging. It's not going to make the reader super excited about reading it. Also, it could potentially lower your score. So, for instance, a rephrase as a hook can actually lower your score. How does that happen? That can happen if you're relying too much on the vocabulary from the question. If you use too many words from the question, what's going to happen is the examiner is not going to count those words, okay, because they're going to say, oh, it's language that we already used on the test. So it's not going to count. That can be a problem if you write an essay. Let's say you write an essay that is 250 words. Well, let's say in your hook, you use 10 or 11 words that are from the question. What the examiner is going to do is they're going to subtract your word count. They're going to say, oh, look, you used 11 words that we already used, so we're not going to count those words. They don't count in your word count. So now your word count is only 239 words. Now you're going to get a penalty for your task achievement. Because you don't have enough words. So we want to be careful of that. Also, a lot of times the way they have worded the question is in a way that sounds already pretty natural. They're using proper word choices and things like that. So what students tend to do if they write a rephrase is they change the words or they use different grammar. So they end up with grammatically their sentences don't sound as good, they don't sound as natural, and in terms of vocabulary their word choices aren't as natural. So you're hurting your vocab score and you're also hurting your grammar score if you're not careful with your rephrase. I can't suggest or advocate that method. I know a lot of teachers do, but that's not the style I want. I think it's kind of a lazy way of writing. A good hook takes time. A good hook is probably the hardest sentence of your essay to write, but it's also a great opportunity. So for instance, a good hook can also allow you to use vocabulary that otherwise may be difficult to use in the rest of your essay. And we're going to take a look at that in our example. I think it's really important. A good hook can also help you to use new, more advanced. Talk a little bit about that. Okay. I've posted the document in the first link, so let's take a look at our hook. Okay? You can follow me there, or if you're looking at this later, just look at the document and you'll see. So what I have done is I've given you a couple of examples, or I've given you an example of what a student has written. So we have this prompt. So some people think a huge amount of time, of money, is spent on protecting wild animals. This money could be better spent on people. To what extent do you agree or disagree? Okay. So I've given this example of how my students often write. They say it's often argued that resources used for protecting endangered species should be allocated to people instead. Grammatically, I wouldn't say there's anything wrong with that. I think the vocab's okay. It's not something, though, that I think is generating a lot of interest in your reader. So what is one thing that we could do? I'm providing two hooks that can provide a little bit more information about that. For instance, so this is a to what extent do you agree or disagree? So that means we have two sides, right? You can either agree with this or you can disagree with this. So I'm providing you with two quick hooks that can show different opinions. Another thing you want to consider when you're writing for an IELTS essay, you want your opinion to be clear. So a good hook also makes your opinion or stance clear. From the very beginning, the examiner can have an idea what side we're going to be on. Okay? So for instance, let's say that we are in favor of protecting wild animals. How can we show that we want to help protect wild animals? We'll take a look at this example. So the ibex, the dodo, and the Caspian tiger all have a horrible common bond in that all of them have gone extinct due to human activity. Okay. So by writing this prompt, I know a couple of things as the reader. I know one, I know that the author has an opinion. For instance, using this word horrible. Horrible is suggesting that the author does not like this or does not think this is a good situation. This is horrible. Okay. This is suggesting to me that in this sentence, this author is probably going to be more in favor of protecting animals. Compare that to the second hook I provided. So let's say I wanted to write an essay where I am against spending money on protecting animals. Okay, so starting off with this, spending money on opening sanctuaries and helping endangered species is a noble goal. The truth is, the reality is that there are people suffering from poverty, hunger, and a lack of shelter. Okay, so again, this is showing the opinion. This is saying, hey, look, I know this is great to spend money on helping animals, but we have people that still need help. Okay, so by reading either of these two hooks, I can immediately identify what specific position the author has. So that's, I would say again, that's a goal you want with your hook. Try to make your position clear. You don't need to hide your position. You can make it clear from the beginning. Because that's the first thing. It makes the position clear. Secondly, it lets you use words that maybe you wouldn't otherwise use. In the first example, we get some specific animals. So for instance, ibex, dodo, Caspian tiger. Okay, we also get bond. We also get extinct. So by using this hook, I'm able to show more vocabulary than if I just gave a rephrase. Okay. If I look at the original hook, what my students typically write, there's no real words here that stand out. Maybe endangered species, but that's pretty much about it. Whereas in these other examples, I get more. Okay. Even in the second example I wrote, we get animal sanctuaries, enacting measures, okay, suffering from something, suffering from poverty, shelter, things like that. So I'm able to do two things with this. I'm able to use more advanced vocab. I'm able to also show my position, my opinion a little bit more clearly. Okay. Just to wrap up really quick, writing a hook is hard. I'm not denying that. I would suggest writing the hook last. So again, a big suggestion to write the hook last. Don't spend all day trying to think of a good hook to write because it's very difficult. It's typically the hardest sentence to write in your essay. Your thesis statement, in some ways, is much, much easier. Okay, your body paragraphs are more important because that's where your argument is. In terms of IELTS and the grade and things like that, the hook is not the most important part. Your body paragraphs are, because that's where your argument is. But a good hook is just an opportunity for you to really demonstrate more of your knowledge and awareness of writing. If you have other questions or things about hooks, be sure to leave a comment, leave a message. If you want to practice writing some hooks and you want to post them here in the comments or in the chat box, feel free to do that. If you're trying to find some guidance on how can I write good hooks or what are some examples of other hooks, my suggestion, like to find examples of hooks, look at newspapers, magazines, things like that. The very first, you want to look at their headlines and their first paragraphs. Why do I say this? Well, if you're a newspaper, if you're a magazine, your job is to get people to read your article. So if you're with that in mind, their job is to try to get readers interested in what you're saying. So headlines need to be ways that draw interest. The first paragraph needs to generate interest and things like that. You really want to be taking a look at newspapers and magazines, their headlines and their first paragraphs, because that's their job, is to try to get people reading. Okay. Some other strategies for hooks, strategies that you'll see, generally include one, like an interesting fact or statistic. For instance, you can see that in my first suggested hook in the document. So for instance, the ibex, the dodo, and the Caspian tiger, I'm referring to actual animals. Okay, so that in that sense, it's a little bit more factual. Second thing would be a startling opinion, something that's unusual or something that's very charged. The last strategy would be the use of stories. For the sake of IELTS essays, you want them to be relatively short, a sentence or two, just to convey an idea. All right, like I said, if you have more questions about hooks, feel free to leave a comment or send me a message. Check out also our Facebook group so you can get some more practice in. Again, my name is Geoff. Thank you guys for your time. We'll see you in a future video. You guys take care. Have a good day, have a good night, and a good afternoon. Take care.